involve. Okay.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
So, in what capacity did you go down to Antarctica?
Yeah. So this year, my school, so I go to Texas A&M University here in the States. And for the first time ever, my university organized a study abroad trip to Antarctica. Um, and so there was about 30 students and five faculty. Uh, about, I would say 20 of the students took like classes like meteorology, oceanography, zoology, things like that. But about 10 of us did research. So the research I did was specifically doing like a documentary on, I think one of the statistics we found was that only 0.0001% of anyone who's ever lived out of all humans ever uh, have ever seen Antarctica. About 1.5 million people ever. Um, and considering the importance of this place to ocean-wide weather, ecology, the environment in general, how can we, as people who are, blessed enough to go there, how can we communicate the challenges that Antarctica faces, and to those who might not ever be able to go, who might not ever be fortunate enough to go, how can we still get them to care? Um, and so that's something I've been working on, getting interviews from professors and scientists in the field, talking to some of the expedition staff, some of the speakers on the ship we took. It's just been an amazing experience to kind of learn more.
Look, those are very important points because, one of the issues, if you look at history over time, has been out of sight, out of mind. And, in a way, the whaling industry was an example of that. Whaling in the Southern Hemisphere, there was no one down there other than whalers. And so they basically exterminated them. There were just very few left. It was no longer economical. Whereas, if you've got people around, people start to become advocates for looking after whales or the environment. And so, the reality is 99.9% of people will never go to Antarctica, but we need people to be advocates, and the enthusiasm and the great arguments of those who are fortunate enough to go there has to persuade them that it is important. As you say, for the environment, for the meteorology, for the climate of planet Earth, it's actually vital. But I think there's another element. It's that human empathy. It's like all those penguins sitting behind you. Some people could go, well, does it does it matter if there are penguins down there or not? But it's part of an ecosystem which, if it is stable and if it is flourishing, then frankly, we all flourish. And if it
Yeah.
isn't, then none of us do that well. But more on the empathy, I think, as we develop as human beings, and it is a process, human beings are developing. If you look at the way we treated each other in the 17th century, for example, it was pretty grim. Um, we're still not nice to each other. There are a number of conflicts around the world, and you just go, oh boy. But statistically, we are improving, and being able to have empathy for each other, to reach out and help others, be more sophisticated in the way we do things is absolutely vital. And look, so it is, that we should want for the penguin communities to thrive because it's part of that matrix. And I think it's important to develop that. But I'm thrilled you got that opportunity because it's an extraordinary place. It really is like visiting another planet, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic. That was my seventh continent. Um,
Oh
so
wow!
yeah.
Oh, you're well traveled.
Yeah, probably not as well traveled as you, but yeah, we're trying. we're trying.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a couple of questions. You mind if I ask you?
Sure, you go right ahead because I've actually got to go and pack the car. We've got a little community meeting out on the west coast of Auckland here. It's a quite a remote beachside community. It's about looking after the environment, actually, sort of removing invasive species and pests, and a good opportunity for we locals to get together. So fire away.
Great. Yeah, my first question is, what is your biggest motivator? What gets you up each morning and pushes you to do what you do?
Oh, look, I think every morning it's the possibility of the day. I mean, obviously it varies with the work that I'm doing, but life is an incredible gift. Um, Obviously, I'm getting older now. You're not here forever. Um, it's amazing how short life is, really, as you start moving through it. And every day is an extraordinary opportunity to have an interaction with people, to do something positive, and to basically extend the adventure of what a life is all about. I mean, in a way, you've just been down in Antarctica, but in some ways, back in Texas, you're able to reflect on that experience. And I think in many ways, that's just as good as being there
Hmm.
because you've been there. No one can ever take that away. That's a piece of knowledge, an emotional journey that you've taken and will always be a part of you. So even just reflecting on experiences you've had is very, very powerful. And in some ways, you learn even more from that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Do you feel like that idea has been formed over time by your own experiences? Just, traveling from a young age?
Oh, look, I think that's right. And, obviously, I was brought up in the household of my parents. My father, Ed Hillary, was the first, along with his climbing partner, Tenzing Norgay, to climb Mount Everest.
Of course.
And I saw a lot of humility in the way he operated. I suppose he could have gone, I'm the first person to climb Mount Everest, but that's not the way he was. He used it to build schools and hospitals for the local people in the Himalayas around Mount Everest. And the way he just lived his life, and that's what we saw as children, was one of he was down to earth. He enjoyed the company of all sorts of people. Um, and he really felt that while Everest sort of launched him in a whole lot of ways, gave him a whole lot of opportunities in business and philanthropy and just in life generally, it was the work for the Nepalese mountain people, building schools and hospitals, fulfilling what they wanted. So he didn't
Mm.
go in there going, look at this village, none of them are educated, they're all illiterate, I better build a school. He never ever did that. They came to him and with a petition, generally written by some child who was vaguely literate, going, please build us a school. And so he was in the business of fulfilling what people wanted. And I think that was a wonderful aspect of it. And of course, being brought up in a household like that was an incredible experience. It opens your eyes to all the different possibilities, that there are for each and every one of us.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, kind of, just looking, all the information on your website kind of about your life as well. It seems like you've tried to live that out as well, continuing on with the Himalayan Trust. So that's fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. As well, you kind of talked about like local communities, and I'm sure in your travels you've met people from everywhere doing everything. What is like the most poignant experiences you've had with local people? And for I know for myself, A lot of the people around me, especially in Texas, generally, I should say the United States in general, don't think beyond like their local communities. Like, what do you think is the value of speaking to people extremely different from you?
Look, I think it's incredibly important, and it's not just a situation of Texas or the United States. We all just live in a little community. I mean, I just live in this part of Auckland in New Zealand. If I need to buy some food, I just go down to a shop down the road. We don't mix with that many people in our day to day necessarily. Um, I think it's vital to get out and about, particularly when you're young, like yourself. Having the opportunity to go to Antarctica, having the opportunity to go to different parts of the world. For me and my family, taking my kids to the Himalayas, for example, is a real foundation stone to their connection with other cultures, other lifestyles. Because obviously, when you go to a place like the Himalayas, Nepal is a very poor country. So many of the people are living a lifestyle that hasn't changed that much for hundreds of years. And you suddenly realize that while they have different belief systems, they lived in a different way, they eat different food, they're actually, we're all the same. We just want to eat good food, feel nourished, enjoy friendship, have meaning in our lives. In other words, whether you're a sort of a local farmer in the Himalayas, you're up there, you're growing food on your little terraced hillsides to feed your family. That's real meaning. Or whether you're living in an American city and you're getting in rush hour traffic, going to work in an office, to get a salary to maintain your family. So much of it is the same, but it doesn't look like it until you really go underneath and sharing time with people. And look, I think one of the most meaningful experiences in my life has been taking my kids to Nepal. My father's Sirdar, his right-hand man, was a man called Mingma Sering. And his wife, Angduli Sherpa, who literally was, I don't know, 4'11". If she walked up to me now as I'm sitting at my desk, she'd look me straight in the eyes. It was going back to this little Sherpa village at 13,000 feet. And there's Angduli, who's sort of like my Sherpa aunt. And, having that connection, taking the kids there, reconnecting with a family that I've known virtually all my life. I first met Angduli when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
And those are meaningful things. They're people things. They're about connection. And I think in terms of getting a message across, the baseline is providing connection for people. So where you've just been down in Antarctica, it's to communicate not just the wonder of Antarctica, all the people you meet there, but to try to relay a sense of connection with the place virtually. I think that's the challenge. And that's the way to make sure people are going to care about Antarctica, about the creatures that live there, and of course, the incredibly important aspect, which is the impact of Antarctica on our climate, our weather, the hydrology of the oceans, just how the planet works. That's couldn't be more important.
Interesting. How kind of have you been able to do that in like the modern world, where the internet you can kind of speak to anyone anywhere? Do you feel like it's helped you kind of spreading your message specifically for, in the Himalayas, but also, in local environmental causes as well?
Well, look, I think our capacity to communicate, particularly, I'm now the chairperson of the Himalayan Trust. I'm on the board of the American Himalayan Foundation in San Francisco, and I was just up there for a board meeting we had at the end of October. And, it's the opportunity to speak out about for me, a lot of these Himalayan situations where we can make a difference for people there. And of course, this works both ways, because we may be helping people in the Himalayas, but we're also communicating to them, the local people, that actually we do care about them, out there in New Zealand or America or wherever people are. And these opportunities to communicate come along. I mean, for example, in May this year was the 70th anniversary of the first ascent of Mount Everest by my father, Ed Hillary, and Tenzing Norgay. And we had these huge celebrations up there in the Everest area, all the local communities, lots of media, down in Kathmandu, a special meeting with the president of Nepal, President Pudel. We went down to New Delhi, where we had an incredible time. I mean, the energy of India is just extraordinary. We felt like rock stars. I mean, there we were, numerous events that we attended, diplomatic events. We flew on to London, where we had a whole series of Everest 70 celebrations, including an audience with King Charles at Buckingham Palace. I might add, it's Buckingham Palace if you can get in there, because it's very hard to get into with all the security and the thousands of people around the perimeter fence. But we got in there, and he was very gracious and interested in not only the 70th anniversary, because his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, previous Duke of Edinburgh, was the patron of the British 1953 Everest expedition, but also the work we're doing up there, education for mountain children, the welfare of Sherpa climbers up on the mountains. So it was great to share that time. And then it went on to New Zealand and up to the United States and San Francisco. And each and every time you have an opportunity to speak to people at events, but also to the media about what's happening and the connections we have. And so you've got to take advantage of those sort of things. Obviously, with social media and with, well, the wizardry of like this call right now, that we have the visuals and the capacity in real time to speak, really extends that opportunity even further. So if there are innovative and impactful ways of getting the message across, those are the things we need to do.
Totally. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I guess, finding the opportunities in throughout our lives, I guess, to
Yeah.
communicate, the important things. Amazing. Um, yeah, so another question I had is, you've climbed Everest twice, correct?
Yeah.
Um, so if you had to choose like an Everest in a totally unrelated field to travel or exploration or anything like that, what would you choose and why?
Well, I think we're all products of what our life history has been, and really the mountains have been a very big part of my life, and I think it would be another mountain. I love the experience. I mean, they're beautiful places. You've seen great mountains down there in Antarctica, but it's the intensity of the experience. And in fact, just last year, I and an old climbing friend, we went out and climbed a nearly 2,000 foot couloir, snow and ice gully going right up the flank of a small peak in the Southern Alps. We had 2 nights out. It was a 3-day trip. Rained on the second night. We were wet and cold. But just sharing that time together was a really powerful thing. It is a communication. And I think, often for a lot of men, it's a wonderful way of doing it, because you're out there in the environment and you almost are communicating by osmosis, by the fact that you're in the moment, you're there, you're supporting each other, you're feeding the rope out, encouraging each other to find a way to get to the top and then to get back off the mountain again. And as it happened, in deteriorating weather, so the navigation was a little bit questionable at times, but then back down into the valley, and then to sort of head out in this fairly untracked, forested mountain wilderness, just stunning country. So to have that experience, to be in such a beautiful place, to have the physicality of the climb, but also the communication and connection you feel with your climbing partner is a wonderful thing. And I think we need to make sure that all of us give ourselves challenges. It doesn't have to be climbing mountains, but of any type, where you get that intensity, that connection with each other. And I think immersing ourselves in nature is very, very important.
Yeah. Do you think nowadays that as a whole, people have kind of lost that ability to like truly connect with nature? Or
Look, I think I don't think people have lost the ability to connect with nature, but I think in their day-to-day lives, it just doesn't happen. We walk down a concrete footpath into a concrete building. We sit on a plastic chair and tap away on a computer, doing mathematical computations about what to invest in. And then we get the lift down inside the concrete building, walk along the concrete footpath, and enter our concrete homes. You've actually got to make a decision that this weekend, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to go walking in a forest or walk up a hill. And we all need to do that, but we have to make that decision because I think you feel better for it. The forests and nature is where we come from. That's what we are. And I work in tourism. It's one of the main areas I work in. And it always amazes me. I'll take people for a short walk in old growth forest, huge, gnarled trunks of trees going up into the sky, epiphytes dripping off the great limbs of the tree with their own little ecosystems up there in the crown of the forest. And people walk through, and you can see they've just got a smile on their face. You're in this beautiful place, walking around trees that are centuries old, birds flying through the air. It feels good. I'm not saying we all have to go and live there 365 days of the year, but it is a refreshing connection, and we should all do it. We should all do it, once every few weeks or once a month. These are important things for us.
yeah. Yeah, amazing. That kind of reminds me of a conversation I recently had, where the guy I was talking to said that when he goes to nature, he's trying to find the truth. Like nature holds the truth. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like your truth is found in nature?
Look, I think, we are a part of nature. And so there is a truth out there. That's right. I think it makes us feel good being out in nature. Um, and I think actually it opens up communication between the members of the group when you're out there on a mission out in nature. So it's a very, very important part. Um, all over the world, all people are becoming more and more urbanized. We live in cities and big towns. We live in houses. We are getting further and further away from that connection with nature. And so we have to make more of an effort. It's only 100 years ago, most people lived out in rural situations. So they really only had to walk out their back door and they were in at least farmland. And probably not that far away was forest or mountains or something like that. But the majority of people, that's not the truth. I mean, if you look at a country like China, I mean, the vast cities of Beijing and all these extraordinary urban areas they have, people are in there throughout the year. And, we all need to make an effort to get out, to broaden our horizons, because you're right. There is a truth in expanding that vision and being connected to nature. I think it's particularly important for young people.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. To answer my own question, I think I would definitely find my truth in
Yeah.
nature. I feel like you're totally right. So much of our days are spent, in front of the computer. There's just something, I don't know, for me almost spiritual about going on a hike and just,
Mm.
you know, being disconnected a little bit from the earth, or sorry, connected to the earth, disconnected from the
Yeah.
outside world. Um, but I kind of want to touch on, for young people, I guess as a young person myself, I'm really interested in ways in which, like, if let's say I wanted to devote my life to being an explorer, whatever that means, an explorer in traveling, but also an explorer in changing the world and innovating in all these different ways. What advice would you give to that person, to that young person, to follow their dreams and be the next great explorer?
Look, a lot of people, when you mention exploration, they'll say that everything's been discovered. We've gone to the deepest deep in the ocean. We've climbed the highest mountain. What's there left to do? And the answer is there is everything left to do. We have only just scratched the surface. We don't even really understand a lot of the ecosystems under the sea. There's more exploration to be done there. There is obviously the science of understanding humanity and different species, the interaction between different species, climatic change, the environment. These are all areas we don't understand. And in fact, you look out into the cosmos, the so-called universe or the multiverses that are out there, and you realize that now our physicists are telling us that 90% of the actual matter out there, we don't even know what it is. It's dark matter, dark energy,
Sure.
and we don't know what it is. And you think there's so much to be understood and discovered. And I think that's incredibly exciting. I love that. It actually makes my everyday enriched, when I read a little more about a scientist in one part of the world or another who comes up with a new bit of evidence for, whether it's in the psychological realm of understanding how humans work and how we work as a community, or whether it's out there in outer space, or how we're learning how to build and grow better crops. There is so much to discover. I mean, exploration is endless. The question is, do we individually have the imagination and the innovation to get out there and find an area where we want to take it to? And it's really up to us, because it is endless.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I think I'm of the same mindset that, like, there's so many questions that remain to be answered. It's almost surprising to me, similarly, when people say, like, we figured out everything already. Um, I just I totally agree that there's so much more to see. Um, that's amazing. And so let's say another kind of question I had with that, in terms of, like, for young people specifically, is what would you say to someone's parents? Let's say their parents wanted them to do, like, the normal route, right? But they wanted to innovate, they wanted to explore the realm of their choosing. What would you say to convince a parent that exploration is a good thing?
Well, back in the 1990s, I ran a youth program taking teenagers to go trekking in Nepal, do a little bit of philanthropic work. It might be painting a hospital ward, or helping put in some composting toilets for a school or something like that. So we did that. We raised money for the charity. But I think the thing is, the big thing of it was what these kids got out of it. And it was life-changing. They connected with other people on the other side of the world, up there in the Himalayas. It for the first time, I think, really enabled them to see their own homes for what they were, the privilege that they came from, the affluence that they had, and put it to contrast to what they were experiencing on the other side of the world. I think those sort of things are a critical part of education. I think if we could send every teenager away to the other side of the world to immerse themselves for 3 or 4 weeks in a different culture, whether it's walking through the villages of Nepal or exploring a big city in another country, I think these are really important things. You learn so much. So the message to the parents is that this really is a vital part of their education, their expansion of who they are, how they fit, and what they can do. And, I know parents get concerned. How do I know they're going to be safe? But the answer to that is that there is no 100% safety in life. There are car accidents in our own communities. People get sick from various reasons. You have to take a little bit of a risk. You need to contain it as best you can. But in many respects, the best experiences in life may have a fair amount of risk involved in them. But the extraordinary thing about it is how you manage that risk. And often it's a very exhilarating aspect to the experience, because there is danger. Like, Nico Harbor, that photograph you have in the background, I've seen some very big seracs carving off those ice cliffs. And of course, they send huge waves 6 feet high across the bay. And you've got to make sure you're well up the beach or you'll get swept away. And, that in itself is terribly exciting, because you're in this very volatile and changeable environment, and you learn from that.
Of course. Yeah. How is that? Do you think that's the attitude that your parents had with you growing up? And is that the attitude that you have with your children?
Look, my parents definitely did have that attitude. They were very prepared to let us get out there and experience things, which also means, when you're a small child, it might mean you fall off your bike and graze your knee when you're learning to ride, or as you're climbing a tree, you fall out of a low branch and you hurt yourself a little bit. Those are useful lessons. I think the current crop of parents around the world, I think we protect our kids a bit too much. I think we need to encourage them to experience life, gravity, consequence, all of these things more fully. We don't want our kids to get hurt, but there are ups and downs in every lesson, and you have to do the lessons.
I see. Yeah. If I might ask, what are some lessons that you feel like, I guess, in your time parenting, that you wish you would have pressed more into your children?
Look, I'm satisfied that I encourage the kids to get out and really throw themselves at a whole range of things, whether it was extracurricular, horse riding, skiing, climbing mountains, ballet, whatever it was. And at school, to really give it your best. If you're going to do these classes, try to understand it, try to really do well. And I think that is a fairly universal requirement or aspiration that parents have, but it's an important one. Sometimes I see, for example, a school that my son went to, there was a principal who felt that even a bit of half-hearted participation was good enough. In other words, there was a running race they were doing. It was a long-distance race. And he felt that, look, a lot of the students, they don't like running. and they're not very good at it. But even if they walk around with their cell phones and chatting together, that's participation. Well, I think that's absolute rubbish. I think those kids, they need to be told, put the cell phone down, get running, make an effort. It's only for the next 20, 30 minutes, make an effort. And, give it your all. You may not be the best runner in the world, but you've got to give it your all. Really see what you're capable of doing. And so I guess I'm saying I'm all for 100% participation in whatever it is that you're doing at the moment. It doesn't really matter. You could be helping an elderly person who lives next door to you with raking up leaves in their backyard. Well, get in there and really help them out. Don't be half-hearted, like I felt this principle was, and calling it participation, because I think that's lukewarm participation, and I think it has no value.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the people I admire the most, it doesn't matter what they do, it's as if they put their all into it, right? Like they could do anything, and still change the world. And kind of on that, since you've accomplished so much in your life, especially from where I sit, uh, who do you admire the most? Who do you feel as if you strive to be, or have striven to be, I guess, if that's a word, throughout your life?
Look, there are lots of people, and I think they've tended to be people who've been very focused, who've been very successful, in the area of mountaineering, in the area of science, in the area of business, who've had ideas and who've pursued them thoroughly. They've put everything into it. So I guess, what I've been drawn to are people or role models throughout my life who've put everything into it. They're not just sitting back and being half-hearted and not committed. I find those sort of people in a whole range of areas really motivate me and have been great role models. And really, I guess I'm not being very specific, but, it could be a young mother over there who's just putting everything into raising her kids, doing an amazing job. That's inspirational. Or it could be a great mountaineer, man or woman, who's does incredible training and who's pushing new audacious lines up big mountains. That's inspirational. Or the people working in science, who are helping frame our place in the meaning of everything. How does the universe work, or the world, or all of these sorts of things? I find that truly inspirational. So it's people who go the extra distance, have from all walks of life, have inspired me throughout my life. And I hope my kids will find similar sorts of inspirations, because it's not just one, it is many. And we do truly contain multitudes, each one of us. And we need to see the complexity of humanity in that way, and indeed human society too.
Yeah, I feel like something that all those people you have in common is, all those people you mentioned that they might have in common is like how they handle failure as well. They grow from failure instead of letting that bog them down, right? And I'm kind of interested, like how you have perceived failure throughout your life, like maybe some ways in which you've like failed, maybe on top of a mountain to anywhere from like someone you couldn't help, and how is that, how does that kind of change your perspective over time?
Look, failure is an important part of our learning opportunity. And certainly I've had that. You go on a mountaineering expedition, you're not necessarily going to reach the top. And in a way, that's why you've gone. If it was such an easy mountain that it was a foregone conclusion. You get to the top. It wasn't any different from going to a ski resort, buying your ticket, getting on the chairlift, and of course you arrive at the top. No effort required. That's not a great achievement. The fact that you go to a big mountain and that it is hard to achieve, the line that you want to climb, the weather, the scope of the mountain, the bivouacs overnight, that makes that achievement, when you do succeed, a very, very powerful one. And I think you learn a lot from your successes, but it's true that your failures, definitely, you learn a lot from them, I think. And I think we should value those, because if you take on a difficult undertaking, and I mean, look, entrepreneurs talk about this in business, that not every entrepreneurial idea is going to be successful. In fact, many state that it's like 1 in 7. So you actually seize these ideas and go, look, it didn't work. We're not going to run with this idea, but look at what we've learned from it. We can apply that to the next approach, or the next mountain, or the next challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I know in mountaineering, it's always about, being able to climb the next mountain, not necessarily summiting at all costs. Do you have like a story of that? Because I know that, I'm trying to get more into mountaineering. I've been able to do a few mountains around the U.S. Um, and for me, that's even like a hard kind of concept. Like, oh, if I'm so close, you know, having to say no, I'd rather be able to climb the next mountain than risk my life to do this one. I would love to kind of hear your mindset on that.
Look, I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and it gets you to a whole lot of different areas. I mean, if you climb some good peaks in the 48 states, maybe you can head up to Alaska.
Mm.
And the Alaska range are truly extraordinary mountains. I've climbed Denali about 10 years, 12, 15 years ago. And, it's an incredible area. Obviously very cold when you're up high there. And, you feel tiny up there on these big mountains. And I think being put in our place is a very healthy thing. And mountains can do that. I mean, they can do it very brutally too. And I've, gone to big mountains, for example, in the north of Pakistan. I was on K2, and I was one of the few to survive a high altitude storm when we were up there at over 26,000 feet. And in fact, I was the only one of 8 people to get down again. And that's a pretty brutal lesson to learn. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. And you've got to develop your experience so that your intuitions, and intuition is a powerful thing. It's often hard when you're in a difficult situation to go through the checklist and go, now, what are the rational parameters of the decision I should make at this point? Because quite often there isn't a lot of time. And if you've got that experience, something inside of you goes, you need to go down now. This doesn't look right. This is a very dangerous situation, and you've got to act on that. And these are certainly important lessons that you can learn up there. And that was certainly one for me, with very, very tragic circumstances, but I got myself down, and a lonely journey down a very big mountain, 7,000 feet of rappelling down fixed rope, soloing down other sections, and never completely sure if I'm going to make it. But deciding that what you've got to focus on is not the big picture, am I going to survive? But how do I descend this little section? How do I get down the 10 meters, the 30 feet of this steep bit of rock? Just focus on that. And when you get to down that 30 feet, you go, I did that.
Yeah.
Now the next step. So it's step by step. It's a way of breaking things down into small bite-sized chunks that you have to deal with now.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I would love to kind of hear your also your perspective on fear. I mean, just the idea of coming down K2 alone, 7,000 feet. How do you how do you let fear not come into your decisions from that?
Fear is a very interesting topic because, I mean, we all understandably try to stay away from a situation that evokes fear, because fear is for a very good reason. It's a sort of fight or flight response. Adrenaline's pumping. You're suddenly going, if I don't get this sorted out, I could get hurt, or I could be killed by falling off or being hit by the car, or whatever the situation is. But fear is a good thing because it's a response to anxiety inducing situations, fearful situations. And it really gives you the opportunity to deal with it. You're totally aware of the situation, you're 100% engaged, and you will sort out a way as best you can to deal with it. It also means, though, by simple connection, that you're in a really exciting situation too. If you take the mountain analogy, you're up on the mountain, suddenly things are getting difficult. You're in this amazing place. It's actually an exciting place. And it's so often after an expedition, those are the moments that you remember the most, when it was hard, when you had to push yourself harder than you thought you could. Those are the times that you look back on, you feel proud of them, and you share them with your old climbing partners when you're back home again. So, that tells you something about risk and fear, but it's getting through it. I mean, if we spent all our lives trying to avoid stress, trying to avoid being put in a situation where you are fearful, well, then you wouldn't do anything. So you've got to get out there and do stuff. You've got to be prepared to take risks. You've got to manage risk. It doesn't mean that you want the worst to happen. That's what life's about, managing risk, whether it's in your financial circumstances, your experiential situations, in your emotional ones. We do it in our love life. The person we love, the kids we're nurturing, there's risk in all of it. And it's how we manage it is the key.
Hmm. Would you say that you have like a bias for action, that you would rather do something than think about doing it?
Look, I do love doing things, but I do love thinking about issues. It's like I said, I mean, I'm not a highly trained scientist, but I'm certainly an amateur science reader. And I find that absolutely riveting, whether it's the universe or insights into nature, the climate, weather, insights. I find that an incredible journey, and they're obviously intellectual journeys. So they certainly are a big part of my everyday through reading and contemplation, but an important part of my life.
Hmm. I see. Um, so we've talked about a lot of places, a lot of very famous places that you kind of been to. From the top of Everest to Denali to all these different areas, and I'm kind of wondering, what's a place that's special to you that you feel that more people should care about, or that it's not maybe talked about enough?
Look, I think really the most topical one is about climate change. I know there are some people still who debate some of these things, but we all have to engage in the environment. It is indisputable that we have a huge human population on this planet. We all aspire to high standards of living. Um, and there is a consequence. There is a consequence to every single action, and we need to come up with solutions. And there are solutions. We'll get energy in different ways. We'll come up with innovative ways of making our homes more energy efficient. How we travel around will also be more energy efficient. It doesn't mean we have to go back to the Stone Age. It means we actually go further into the future, but do things differently. If you think about the lives of people 100 years ago and compare the lives that we have now, they are wildly, wildly different. And it needs to be the same in another 100 years. And this will be a way for us, as a generation or as generations, to make sure that future generations have amazing lives, but also are good stewards of the environment, of the planet, of its resources. And these are important things. It's about actually growing up, of a growing sense of maturity. It takes an emotional maturity to realize that change is necessary. All of us do, frankly, we want consistency. Too much change is a bit threatening, but in fact, change has to happen. And that's what maturity, I think, is all about. You acknowledge that, yeah, I've been doing it this way for all this time, but things have to change. And that's a good thing. It's also, it can be very exciting, and that certainly draws me.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think the Antarctic Peninsula is one of the fastest warming places in the world. Um, I, it's amazing. I mean, like it's amazing to me that it's only my first time going, but you could kind of see the impacts, and all the people who have been there before, them talking about, like, penguin colonies can't lay their eggs at the usual time they do because of there's so much snow because of precipitation, which is ultimately caused by rising temperatures, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see the, I guess, those impacts in real life. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, and I guess uh, kind of my final question to you, and again, I really thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I know it's been a little bit. We've communicated, very busy schedule. I know. Is what are some great book recommendations that you would give to anyone, and
Book recommendations.
book recommendations, and what's the one thing that you think you would leave a young person with if they came up to you and asked for like one piece of advice to live their life?
Well, look, a book recommendation. You've just been down to Antarctica. I think one of the classics is Worst Journey in the World by absolutely Cherry Gerard. And it's a very insightful book. It's obviously 100 years old, but it's written in quite an animated fashion. And, it's a bit of a classic. So I think there are a number of adventure books that are good for people to read, because it's about human beings going out there and pushing themselves beyond what they really felt that they could achieve, and going beyond. And I think those are incredibly powerful experiences. It's not so much about Antarctica or climbing in the Himalayas. It's about people extending themselves and what human capacity really is. But my recommendation for a young person is get out and explore your world. You don't have to travel to the other side of the world. You could just be at home, but we tend to live in very tight little communities. Get out there, help some other people, see some other aspects of the community that you live in. Go to nature and have experiences. And perhaps that might take you around the country, it might take you around the world. And those are great aspirations as well.
Wow. Well, amazing. Thank you so much again for speaking with me. I was looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm really glad to have been able to talk to you. Um,
Well, thank
yeah.
you. No, I appreciate your persevering with all our efforts to communicate. It was kind of timely, though, that you, in the meantime, went to Antarctica and had that truly extraordinary experience. So, congratulations on that. And I hope your career takes you to amazing places and you do great things. So, all the best, Aku.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Bye
See
bye.
ya.